Hi everyone. We might get started here today, and then if more people come in, we can just admit people as they come. We are recording today's session, just please note that that is happening, and the recording will be available later on um, via the internet, that thing called the internet. Hello to Jason Nelson from Oklahoma, Conungra, and Bergen, of course, usually a co-host of these laser talks. Oh yeah, and greetings from the Das Lab peoples in Regensburg in Bavaria country. I miss your cookies. That's not important. Anyway, so hi everybody. Welcome back to another Laser Bergen talk. This is our ongoing series of talks and lectures and creative works that in this particular series we engage with more than human and post-human narratives, digital creative practices, techno arts and AI, and a range of other themes. Laser Bergen is part of the Leonardo Laser Network, founded by Leonardo, the International Society for the Arts, Sciences and Technology. They are our partner institution for Laser Bergen, and Laser Bergen is hosted by the Center for Digital Narrative, which is a Norwegian center of research excellence at the University of Bergen that explores how narratives and creative practices are shaped by computation and are transforming culture. So my name is Alinta Krauth. I'm your host of Laser Bergen today. This is actually the fourth in our series of Laser Bergen lecture events. So thank you to everyone joining today, and thank you to those who've been with us from the beginning. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to have a structured kind of Q&A panel with two esteemed guests, artist Donna Davis and ecologist Darren Crayn. They're going to introduce us to aspects of their work, and in particular, how they've worked together to produce art science outcomes involving particular plant species. And we will, as usual, have question time from the audience at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat as you think of them as we go along. I just want to briefly introduce you to both of our speakers. So Darren Crayn describes himself as a failed engineering student, born again as a biodiversity scientist, and now the director of the Australian Tropical Herbarium. His professional life is equal parts management, leadership, teaching, and research. His research aims to find out how many plant species exist, where they occur, how they are related, how they have evolved, and how people use them. So this means a lot of fun outdoors in interesting places, and also helps humanity understand the natural world so that we can best conserve it for its intrinsic value and for the benefit of our descendants. So he's published over 140 scientific articles, undertaken research in 12 countries, and sits on many national and international advisory boards and panels. So for any other academics watching today, no pressure, just 140 research articles there. But Donna Davis is a multidisciplinary artist who examines human and non-human relationships with respect to ecological health, exploring the intersections between art and science. She's often embedded within ecological research projects. Her work tells stories that examine science through a creative lens, exploring imagined futures and constructing new ways of seeing complex natural systems and the role of humans within them. To do so, she has undertaken a number of residencies within scientific institutions, such as the Brisbane Botanic Gardens, Queensland Herbarium, Department of Environment and Science, and the Australian Tropical Herbarium, which is what we'll be talking about today. I've known Donna for quite a while now, and I've known of her work for quite a while, and her work is just so fascinating and inspiring. So it's really, really nice to be able to bring that to a new audience today. So because we're going to do this as sort of like a Q&A session, it will be me sharing my screen today. So I will just bring this up quickly for you.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, good. Sorry. So, so for a start, hello to Donna and Darren. Thank you both so much for being here and for spending your Friday night with us virtually. Do you want to kick us off? I've just read out descriptions of both of you, but do you want to kick us off by telling us a little bit more about what you do and how you might describe your own research? Perhaps we can start with you, Donna, just to tell us a little bit about the artistic mediums that you use, and what you typically use to make your work, because I have a few pictures here of some of your beautiful works.
Oh, well, thank you, Alinta, and thank you for inviting myself and Darren to be part of the panel. So I'm coming tonight to you from Juggera, Yuggera and Yugarapul country, southeast Queensland, and it's 7 o'clock here tonight. And it's quite balmy. It's quite hot. So I've got the fan blowing on me. I hear it snowing over there. Look, I'm multidisciplinary artist and work across a variety of media depending on what story I'm wanting to tell. I work from things like soft sculpture to working with the image that you see up on the screen there. There's a whole heap of copper wire, like sort of French knitting or Viking knitting, to create some of those structures that you see in the background or the copper wire works. And then you'll see imagery of actual plants. So I actually take imagery out in the field as well of plants that I'm working with and plants in the studio. So it really, really depends on the actual story. In the works that you're looking at here, is it okay if I kind of just talk about this work, Alinta? Because I think that will give a better idea of how I work. So in this work here, I was really wanting to kind of, I guess, pull a little bit on the emotive side of plants and looking at plants from a different lens. And as we'll hear from Darren shortly, a lot of the plants I like to work with are often threatened in some way. So I like to work with endangered, critically endangered, vulnerable, threatened plant species and kind of try and tell the story of their plight and also help us, I suppose, to see plants as something other than just a green backdrop, to see them as individual species, to see them as multi-species kin, to see how we are connected to these species and how we are entangled within these species, within these ecological networks, and I guess how our role impacts the climate change and things like that. So in this particular work, I like to kind of say I like to play between science fact and science fiction, and so the plant species that you see depicted here is actually an endangered plant from the Tropical Mountain Plant Science Project. Because these plants are losing their habitat, I wanted to kind of pose this question about, well, if plants lose their habitat, what are humans willing to do in terms of helping them or providing habitat? Would the human be willing to offer themselves as landscape? And so these works are entitled Implant, and they are a series of fictitious works that I've created that were designed to be these kind of human plant implants to be adapted to the human. I've used imagined concepts such as how could I possibly connect a plant to a human? And, looking at things like fungi is more closer to human than what a plant is. So maybe the fungi could attach to the human, and then the plant having a symbiotic relationship with the fungi would attach to the fungi. And I was kind of just playing with all of these ideas of like what other issues are there with the human system. And I know in Australia, diabetes and obesity can be an issue. So here I thought the fungi could hook into the human system and take some of the sugars that the humans, take too much of, and that would help feed the plant. So I guess like my mind always goes wild when I start to think more in the science fiction or imagine futures, I guess. But this is an example of a work that involves Viking knitting, so a soft sculpture, like landscape photography and then also studio photography layered up in something like Photoshop. And then this work is actually a video work that actually kind of floats around in that box that you see. So then there's video included in that as well. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of an outline, Alinda.
Yeah, I mean, they're beautiful. And, so much of your work is digital, but I can see here that you also have these works that are not necessarily so digital at all, right? You work across so many different types of media. You do print works as well, or prints of digital works.
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, and I guess it comes to that idea of kind of how do you get a message to different audiences? And I guess one way is, as you see on the screen now, is taking it outside of the gallery is a great way of telling new stories and engaging new audiences. But also, we all know that when we go into galleries, we're drawn to different works. There's some works that perhaps we kind of just walk straight past, and others we're really drawn to. So I guess using this variety of media allows me to try and touch different audiences. And you did see a work there that was soft sculpture leaf shapes, and this was an interpretation. This one was created actually when I was back working with you, Alinta, at the Queensland State Archives. I was doing a residency at the archives at the same time. I was doing a residency with the Tropical Mountain Plant Science Project. And this was basically my visual interpretation of the report or the paper that was written by a scientist about the threatened flora that was living in the high mountaintops up in the Daintree area. And each leaf shape represents one of the different 36 species that was identified as being rare, vulnerable, or threatened. And so I placed them up on all these tiny different little blocks to kind of indicate altitude that they were sitting within the mountain ranges. They were then all tied up. If you can kind of see, they're tied up in with little pink string. These are all the pink archival tape that has been taped around them, kind of talking about how the human system deals with concepts like threatened plants, and there's a lot of bureaucracy that is tied up in saving some of these plants. And so there was actually a video that played over the top of this, which outlined the wet tropics World Heritage Area that slowly kind of marked its way around these plants. These species, to kind of talk about some of the toing and froing that went with just trying to declare this very special and precious place something worth saving.
Yeah, beautiful. And actually, I remember when we were working there at the time, I remember you saying, how strange it was that there are certain documents that get kept and get looked after and are precious to humanity. And why are these plants not in that same sort of category? What are we doing for these plants instead? And that still stuck with me, you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That idea of climate control. And I think in any collecting institution, you have got all of these efforts to protect and conserve the human artifact, and how much energy are we putting in to save the natural environment. Yeah, and how hard it is to save. Yeah.
Well, on that note, Darren, did you want to tell us a little bit sort of broadly about what the Australian Tropical Herbarium does and some of the sort of important topics that it tackles, including this tropical mountain flora project that you have or had?
Absolutely. Thank you, Alinta, and thank you everybody for tuning in. It's really, really wonderful to be here, and it's a really special experience for me to interact with artists, and through the project I've had with Donna, I've found that a really rewarding and stimulating interaction. Donna and other artists often help us scientists to see what we do through a different lens, and to communicate in different ways that we're not trained to do, and that's really invigorating. But let me start by saying I'm coming to you from the same province as Donna, Queensland, But we're about 1,600 kilometres away from each other. It's a very big province, as many of you know. It's a big country. So I'm right up in the tropical north of the state of Queensland, and in an area which is a World Heritage property called the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area of northeastern Queensland. And here I direct a research institute which holds collections. It holds preserved collections of many thousands of species of plants, and functions a bit like a museum, a research museum for plants, as opposed to most research museums people would know of. Natural history museums are principally about animals or culture. So an herbarium is a research collection for plants, and what we do here is a lot of different kinds of research, but principally it's about trying to understand, as I kind of outlined in my bio, trying to understand what species we share this planet with, where they are, why they are where they are, and how we can best conserve them so that our habitat is protected and the value of the plants to our lives is ensured for the future. So I'll touch a little bit upon the way in which Donna and I guess, first came to work with each other. I had seen a previous exhibition that Donna had created in Brisbane, and so I was aware of her work. And then when we put together this tropical mountain plants science project, we started to think about, because it was about conservation, and one of the outcomes needed to be raising awareness of the threat of climate change to biodiversity, particularly tropical biodiversity. We started thinking about the ways which we could best communicate those messages beyond our scientific colleagues and beyond the readership of scientific journals. And we thought one of the best ways to do that would be to engage an artist to interpret what we did through an artistic lens and reach audiences that we don't normally interact with. So the reason we initiated this project was it's become increasingly aware to biodiversity scientists. It's become increasingly obvious to us just how impactful climate change will be for our biodiversity. But climate change won't have an even impact across the globe. There will be parts of the globe and elements of our biodiversity that are more severely impacted than others. And one of the habitats that we think are going to be more severely impacted are tropical mountaintops, because existing right on the tops of the tropical mountaintops are species that are adapted to a very narrow set of environmental parameters. And because they only exist on those mountaintops, they've actually got a very small area of habitat, because mountains are pointy, and the area on the top of the mountains that those species inhabit is actually very small when you add it all up. And because as the world warms, if species are going to tolerate that, they will need to either tolerate it where they are or migrate with the warming world. But if you're already sitting on the top of a mountain, you can't go any further up to escape the warming. So these species on mountaintops we think are more vulnerable than many others because they're kind of trapped on those mountaintops. There's nowhere they can go. We did some modelling work which indicated that there are about 80 or 90 species of plants on the mountains just around where I live. They're found nowhere else in the world, and they're all apparently critically threatened by the warming world. So we, as scientists, thought this is terrible, this is awful, had an emotional impact on us. But as scientists, we started to think, well, what can we do about it? And obviously, we'd like to stop global carbon dioxide emissions, but as a small group of scientists, we're not going to have an impact there. But what we could do was to launch a project to better understand the plants that are occurring on these mountaintops, but then to take some of them out of their natural environment and keep them in a safe place, off-site. In the same way that we keep endangered animals in zoos, we can keep individuals of endangered plants in botanical gardens. And so that's what this project's been all about. It's been documenting the plants on the mountaintops, doing a bunch of research on them, but also sampling them and growing samples of them in botanic gardens where they'll be well protected and available for us to put back into the landscape in the future if the opportunity arises. And so Donna came on board with that project, or to that project, so that she could help us understand the broader significance of what we do in terms of the societal impacts and help us get those messages out to people who we normally don't interact with, but also just to make some fantastic art.
Yeah, so Donna,
Thank you, Darren.
did you go, you went there, right? And you got to be a part of some of this. You did some of the field trips. What was sort of the process of being a part of this journey?
Yeah, well, I guess so. Everything that Darren's just said, like, it still gives me kind of goosebumps. And I think as soon as he started telling me about this project and he used these terms, I remember one time he was explaining and he said, like plan A is to conserve the environment. We don't think that that's going to be for these plants anymore. We think we have to go to plan B, which is, put them into living collections, into botanic gardens. And I guess I had previously done works around this idea of plan B, and here it was happening. And when I was talking to people before I was ready to head up into the field with the team, I can remember talking to them, and then as I was talking, they would kind of stop and go, hang on a minute, so you're saying that we can't save those ones anymore? And and just there was this real visceral reaction with people that I was talking to. So look, before I went up into the mountains, first of all, there was a whole heap of kind of preparation. So I knew I'd be going to be doing a lot of walking up some of these mountains, and these are tropical mountains. So there's lots of vines and it's very thick, and there's lots of other, little critters and things up there, leeches and ticks and all sorts of things. So I was getting prepared for traveling in the field, getting my field equipment ready, getting my stamina ready for the hiking, working out how much equipment I could carry out into the field with me. And it was just, look, it was fascinating because as part of the team, there were botanists, ecologists, horticulturalists, artists, First Nations, rangers. It was just such a really diverse and interesting mix, and everyone had such amazing knowledge of the plants in such different ways. And so, look, most of the time I feel like I didn't even need to say anything. I was too busy just listening, going, hang on, what did you just say? That was fascinating. And I guess one of the things that really stuck out to me in the field trip was this real sense of urgency. And being up in the field as they're collecting parts of the plant. So often they would collect parts of the plant. There was an image on one of the slides that you saw two people down low, and they were reaching up with these great big clippers. And basically they were a set of pruners on these huge long poles to get up, 20 meters or whatever to the top of the canopy to grab a little cutting of the plant so that plant could be wrapped up and specially prepared, put in an esky and sent straight down to Canberra to the Australian National Botanic Gardens, ready for propagating within a couple of days. And I guess this really started getting me thinking about the idea of transplants and implants, and because these plants were going to be taken out of their tropical mountain home, displaced and put into these foreign landscapes to grow, away from all of their other ecological connections, but it was to save their species. And so I obviously started to see a lot of these comparisons between human and other. And again, the sense of urgency and that was what got me. And I guess because that's such an emotive response, that was what led me to straight away be starting to think about plants. And again, as Darren had said, plants can't move. They're kind of trapped up on the mountaintops. They can move over time, but Darren can tell you how long it would take a plant to kind of move through seed and natural propagation. But so, of course, I started to think, well, what if plants could move? How would that make us feel? So I started creating all these little animated creatures, and the top half are the actual images I captured of the propagated specimens down at the Australian National Botanic Gardens. And then the bottom half of the root systems that are actually running the little guys along there. Like whenever I would pull veggies out of my veggie garden and saw a really amazing root structure, I would take photos and I would animate those photos. I often would place these little critters in often dangerous situations. So often they'd be on the road. And I kind of wanted people to, there's a sense of, there is a humour that can kind of drag people in. So there's a humorous element to this. But once you actually get drawn in to look at these little critters running around, hopefully you have a bit of an emotive response once you realise why they're running around. But I guess I really wanted, again, to make the viewer think, how would I feel? Again, what would I offer? What would I give? What would I change? What would I do to help these creatures? Because the Daintree is a long way away for many people. Darren is living up in that area. I am, like you said, about 1,000 kilometres south of the Daintree. So it's not an area I see every day. But we all know, most Australians and probably worldwide, most people would know how important the Daintree World Heritage Area is. But we're not on the ground watching it. So, I guess from that, not only did I learn a lot of botanical and ecological knowledge, I was just building up this real emotive catalogue and really examining, I guess, my own thoughts on how I felt about this, what my role within this is. And so I guess I was questioning myself and my own actions as much as I was questioning, the wider climate change discussion.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and these are stills of moving works and video works, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're
Yeah. Oh, I think this one should play. Yeah. And this work you're looking at was actually commissioned by the State Library of Queensland, and it was a great work to work on. I made them look like security cameras that these little critters were running around behind the scenes at night through all of the back areas of the State Library of Queensland. And I was really lucky to have this work played. It was on a very large screen, probably about 3 meters by, say, 3.5 meters, and it was in this main thoroughfare where foot traffic would walk past every day. And it was open 24/7. You didn't have to go into a room. It was in the public realm. And it was on display for over 6 months. So, people got to see these little critters and learn a bit more about the project that Darren had set up. So again, I think that idea of working with scientists was such a valuable opportunity for me, because I do get to, kind of understand some of the thoughts and the words that we hear around climate change. I get to learn, I get visual stimulus, and I get to take it outside of their science and into different realms.
Mm. And do you think, Darren, do you think that it changes the science at all to work with an artist? Does it work both ways at all? Do you see anything differently when you have an artist in residence there with you, or?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously, there's the methodology and the practice of science, which is relatively fixed. But what interacting with an artist helps us to do is to think about the perspective and think about how we think about science and the impact that science has. Because we do science, we collect data, we analyze data, but then it effectively doesn't exist until such time as we communicate it. you can have a mountain of data sitting in your top drawer in your office, but it doesn't effectively exist until it's communicated, because at that point it becomes able to be used by somebody else. It contributes to the body of knowledge. But until that communication occurs, it's effectively non-existent. And so we have our traditional ways in which we communicate what we do, typically to other scientists, but increasingly through the media, the television and the internet and other kinds of communications channels. But then it's typically scientists talking to journalists, or scientists doing podcasts, or some other form of a scientist talking to somebody who's eliciting some knowledge out of them, much like you are to me now. But what I really relished about working with Donna was we just did our science, and Donna was just there. And yes, we interacted. She would ask us questions. We would also ask her questions about what her feelings were and thoughts were about the work that we were doing. But it was a much more organic way of, in essence, co-creating the messages and co-creating the communications medium, as opposed to how it typically happens, which is we do the science, we complete the science, and only when it's time to communicate the science do we then engage with the media.
Mm.
So the opportunity to begin, and Donna was there from the outset of the project, the opportunity to walk together in the mountains and in the labs and everywhere else, and as I say, to co-create the messages was a revelation to me. It was a very different way of working for me, and really exciting way of working for me, because I saw how Donna took the work that we were doing, and some of the little really things we do when we're collecting data that we regard as completely boring and mundane. And she found wonderment in that. She was asking all sorts of questions. Why do you use those words when you describe that thing? And that was a real challenge to us to really think differently about what we do, and the things that have become second nature and almost automatic to us. And they're clearly not automatic or mundane or boring to other people who haven't been trained in that same way. So there was mutual enlightenment, I think, all through this process.
Yeah, and I really like that idea that, in the sciences, as you say, you have a fixed methodology. It's kind of planned out from the beginning, and there's not necessarily that sort of wiggle room. But then someone like Donna, you might come in and you have this much more open methodology, right? Or you can just go in all these different directions, and you can just pick up on the tiniest little thing and run with that instead.
Yeah, exactly. And it really is that thing. And I guess being absolutely involved from the project's inception, and being part of the team, I was, whenever they were having group team meetings, I was always involved in the team meetings, and, being out there in the field. And then every night, when there was a lot of processing still happening every night back at the campsite, I was just I was just so embraced by the team, and there was a lot of inquisitiveness from both parts, again, of that, because we do kind of we're very similar. Artists and science are very similar in a lot of ways, in terms of having an idea, testing an idea, and then having some sort of output at the end, but basically wanting to sort of have some sort of messaging in what we want to put out there into the public realm. But there's also, we use a very different language. And so just some of those things were really, really evident once we started talking. And I think also just having that mutual respect for what each other does was also super important. So as I was having these ideas, I would always chat with Darren first and say, Darren, okay, so this is the idea I've got. are you okay with me kind of pulling on this string? And Darren always was just like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I don't think there was nothing I said to him that he went, oh, hang on a minute, and that kind of goes back to your question that you asked before, Alinta, was, was there any, was there anything that kind of changed the science? How did you feel about Donna interpreting your science type of thing? There was an absolute trust, I think, on both parts to go with that. And it still happens. Like, the project was a 4-year project, so we were working together for a long time, but still, I'll often just text Darren and go, hey, Darren, I've got this other idea. And he's like, yeah, sounds great. So everything, nothing's too much. And he always takes time to make sure he talks through what I want to talk through, which is fantastic. I'm very, 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 very lucky to have been brought into that team.
Yeah, that sounds super valuable, and I really like that idea of, if you're going to be part of a bigger scientific project, to be able to be there from the beginning and to see the whole thing in action just seems really, really important.
Well, and I think there are a lot, and especially in Australia, there are a lot of art science residencies, but often they are quite short. And for me, maybe I just work really slow, Alinta, but I do like to take my time, and it is because there is so many big stories to be told. And if you really want to get in there and get those juicy stories, I think, you being embedded from its inception is super important.
I just wanted to hone in on this work that's on the screen at the moment, because it's this sort of beautiful digital sculptural piece. It's called Transplant Becoming Kin. We in our previous laser talks, this has come up a couple of times, this idea of becoming kin with other species, and sort of, this general idea of stewardship with other species. I just wanted to zoom in on this, and sort of what it means to you, Donna, or what it means to both of you, this idea of kinning with other species, particularly plant species, and how that's kind of being shown through this work.
Yeah, well, again, like I said, it was I had such an emotional response to being actually in the field. So just reading about the project and then being in the field and seeing those plants, really got me, and it still does. I still have such a connection to these particular plants, and I guess. And also, I was doing this residency at the same time at the Queensland State Archives. So there was this real conversation I was having with myself and with the objects I was looking at in the archive, and the objects and the plants I'm looking at in the mountaintops, and really starting to think about, well, there's these hierarchies where humans kind of put themselves above all other living things, and I just kind of started to think, well, what happens if we removed all those hierarchical systems and we all became one level and we all became kin? And so then I started thinking, well, how would you become kin? And of course, the irony is that it became paperwork, right? Because as you see on the left-hand side there's these documents, and these are called multi-species application forms. And so it was about, these plant species applying to become, like part of the multi-species collective, if you will. And so I created these documents referencing a whole heap of other bureaucratic documents I'd been looking at the archive. So they're asking lots of questions about their residential address and their home life and their kind of relationship status and all of those type of things. And they were answered from an ecological standpoint. So there's this ecological knowledge when you're looking at this document. And these documents were tiny, tiny little documents. They were referencing the idea of microfiche. And when I was at the archives, they had said one of the best ways of preserving a document was on this microfiche, because all you need is a light and a magnifying glass and you can read the document. So I created this sort of archival document to read these multi-species applications. But I guess it was, how do you feel about And what would it mean if all organisms, not only plants, but all organisms became multi-species kin, and they then got all of the rights that are afforded to humans? What does that mean for us? And how would we, again, the irony of this, how would we manage that? Would we have to manage that? How could it be? How could something like this roll out? So again, just a lot of questions, of how do I see a future where we would become kin with other species? And I guess plants, often I guess there would be a kinning with animals, probably more easier, because I guess a lot of people would say that their pets, so their dogs or their cats or their birds, are part of the family, right? You often hear this, and can't do anything, they're part of the family and they're included in everything. Do we extend that to plants? Like, are the other plants part of our family as well? Well, to me, plants are part of my family, and the current project I'm currently working on is really kind of drilling down into this entanglement, human plant entanglement. Why and how do we feel a certain way about plants?
So you're working on something new at the moment.
Yeah. So I'm currently resident at the moment at the Queensland Herbarium, which is a little closer to home. And I'm working with a particular plant family. So I'm working with one plant family, the Metaceae family, which is a lot of our Australian eucalypts and tea trees. And I'm working with that one particular plant family. And I wanted to look at this plant family with reference to my plant family, or with my family, the Davis family, and looking at the Metaceae and the Davis family, and kind of looking at this idea of family trees, and again, this hierarchical classification, and entanglement, and why I am drawn to one particular plant family, and how that's and how I'm entangled with that, and how my perhaps how my family or my ancestors have also been entangled with these plants. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds very
It's very big, very early stages at the moment, but yes. And I think I saw someone online a minute ago, Joanne Drayson's. I did see her online, where we've been working at the herbarium together. An amazing First Nations artist who is now also working at the herbarium, and we're working on this project kind of side by side. So yeah, watch this space. There'll be some exciting stuff to come from here.
Darren, I mean, plants are obviously incredibly important to you as well. Would you consider them family?
Oh, most certainly. Yeah. I was just reflecting internally as Donna was speaking there, on this idea that we used to, generations ago, before the scientific revolution, before Western society emerged in its current form, we didn't separate ourselves from nature. We saw ourselves as part of nature, and many, of course, traditional societies still live that way. But of course, we in the West, particularly we in the sort of scientifically influenced West, have deliberately separated ourselves from nature in order to be able to adopt the scientific method, which is to be a dispassionate observer, to break any emotional connection you have with your subject in order to be able to investigate it without bias. So we've deliberately separated ourselves from nature as scientists, at least in a philosophical sense, in order that we can understand nature. So it's a kind of quite a paradox. Take yourself away from something in order that you can understand it better. I was just reflecting on what Donna was saying about plants and people being kin again, bringing us back together into this sort of multi-species community and all of those sorts of things. And so we were both working alongside of each other. Donna was seeking to reconnect us with our plant kin, whereas everything I was doing was taking us away from that. So it was this funny little dance we were doing, Donna, I guess, metaphysically, while we were working together. But yes, of course, I do feel a very close affinity to plants. I eat them all the time. They're the basis of our food chain. No life on Earth would exist without plants. They They harvest the raw materials from the soil and from the sun. They create the habitat, the food for all other life to exist, moderate our atmospheres, provide us with water, clean water, all the rest of it. And they look great in gardens. They're both amenity, they're both our survival system, but also our amenity and our enjoyment and our pleasure. So yeah, we're inseparable.
Yeah, beautiful. I know we have just 15 minutes left, so I thought I might open this up to audience questions now as well. If everybody is all right with that, indeed, I might just stop sharing this screen for a minute. Are there any questions from our audience today for our two speakers? Thank you so much for being here, both Donna and Darren. And again, thank you for coming in on your Friday night. And thank you to the plant behind Donna, who's also joining us today. I don't know if that plant has a name, Donna.
No, well, I do just call this guy Fern. But yeah, just beautiful. Doesn't, yeah, I would prefer just Fern to be featuring rather than my head, actually. But yes,
Fern is a good name.
I know, right? It's very descriptive.
So if there are any questions from the audience, sorry, I'm not sure. I haven't had a look at the chat. Please feel free to turn on your sound if you like and ask any questions that you have. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions here. Um, the first is for the students who are watching today. Can you suggest some ways in which they could start creating artworks with flora? So if you were doing this for the very first time, what would you suggest?
Is that for me?
Oh, it could be
Um,
for either of you, but
I, for either. Well, first of all, just I always say that no plants were harmed in the making of my work. So I'm also always very considerate to the plants. I take photos, I don't take plants. But yeah, I would say find the plants that you're really connected to and go and spend time with the plant. So a lot of the works that I create are absolutely created because I've spent so much time out in nature with that plant, looking at that plant, touching that plant, watching it flower, watching its seasons before I would create the art. So again, it's getting to know. It's like you're getting to know anyone. If you want to like do a portrait of someone, you're going to have to kind of hang out with them and get to know them a bit more. So it's about relationship building for me.
And I like how also in your practice you were talking about, how you were taking pictures of just individual roots and so on to kind of cut them together and put them together. I know a lot of artists who might just, turn to publicly available imagery to do that, but you're actually going out with your camera and stitching everything together. And that's a really interesting way to start, just take out your camera and just take pictures of all sorts of different things and start to stitch it together.
That's right. I have such a library of images and yes, many hard drives full of images. So whenever I do find something that's really interesting, yeah, absolutely just take pictures and I kind of have them in little boxes so that can be, like glassware or interesting bits of, scientific equipment that I take pictures of. And again, just, to beautiful landscapes, flowers, pollen, as you saw in that image for Q&A. They've been starting to take scanning electron microscope images of pollen. So I've got from the micro up to the macro, and yes, they all. Sometimes I have photos sitting in my library for 5 or 10 years, and then all of a sudden they're just needed, and I pull that one back out and use it.
We have a second question, which is, how do you choose what data and research to focus on when creating artworks? So this would be for you again, Donna. Um, the data and research that you're seeing in the scientific works or having been given by Darren, how do you choose what to focus on there if there's so much?
Yeah. Yeah, and there is always so much. And again, this is again, any art science collaborative work is again all about relationship. And Darren and I work really well together to allow me to be creative. So I absolutely have to have some sort of emotional response to the science, and I start with the emotion. So how did I feel when this was happening? How did I feel when I started to see plants getting wrapped up and put into eskies and put into like a, like an air freight, to get it down quick to get into the soil to be propagated? How did I feel when I was standing on the top of the mountains and looking at this amazing landscape and being told that the clouds are lifting, this landscape may not no longer be, in so many years, it's happening now? How does that make me feel that plants can't move and can't get out of that? And how does it make me feel that most people don't even know about this, and most people don't even know that that's happening? That's where I start. So I start with an emotion. I then come up with a concept, and then I would normally run it by the scientists that I'm working with and say, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And yeah, as I said, all the scientists have been, amazingly supportive of all of those, because again, they're all emotional, and they do have those connections as well.
And follow-up question here. Okay, two more questions. Sorry. How do you balance? Oh no, three more questions. How do you balance the science fact and the science fiction of the works for you, Donna?
Oh, is that a question for
So
Donna?
tricky.
Yes.
Or for either of you, yeah.
You
Yeah,
go,
you want to
Donna.
answer? Oh, okay.
No,
I
you.
was going to say that it's always a really tricky one working in this area. So I do always say that I work between science fact and science fiction. I will often refer to my artworks as a gateway to the science. So this is just an entry point, just to get your attention almost, and I will refer I will kind of say, this is my artist statement. This is the science. Whenever I'm doing public talks or on panels, as I am tonight, I'll always ask a scientist to be with me, because any scientific questions then get directed there. But I do make it very clear that this is imagined work, they're fictitious work. So it's usually in the artist statement language that I will be reaffirming that, I have imagined and extended upon the science.
Mm. And Darren, can you give advice for artists on how to approach scientists for collaboration?
Absolutely. I think you will find almost every scientist will be really interested in what an artist has to say. As Donna pointed out before, there is a lot about the way we approach the work we do that's similar between artists and scientists. And at least in my field, scientists are working with artists, particularly graphic artists, all of the time. So, and many scientists, I mean, most scientists I know have an artistic practice of some kind. They're a musician, or they draw, or they're a photographer. So there is very little light between the worlds of science and the worlds of art. There's a huge amount of overlap. So all I would advise you to do is to just start talking to a scientist. You will very quickly find a lot of overlap in your imagination and your passion and that of the scientist, and you'll very quickly, I guarantee, find an area that is common, or a question that is common to you both and interesting to you both, and a way to work.
Mm.
Don't be scared, is all I would say. You will be you'll be surprised at how easy it is to strike up a conversation, and a rewarding, enriching conversation.
And a follow-up question to that is, how do you, Darren, keep your hope and enthusiasm alive, knowing working with this changing climate is a big question.
That's a big question. We work with data. We try and understand and quantify what is actually happening in order that we can then take action that has an impact. So we try not to get defeated by the big issues. We obviously are continually disappointed by the lack of broader global action on issues that we know are happening and which we've presented data for, and there is inaction because of political reasons. That's devastating to us. But as scientists, we collect data, we make analyses, we give policymakers the tools to make the right decisions. When they don't, that's disappointing. But what I think in terms of biodiversity is, yes, climate change, like many other things, is a challenge to biodiversity, but it won't be wholesale destruction and it won't end life as we know it. Life on Earth has existed for 4 billion years, and it's been through much greater challenges than what we project climate change will be. Why climate change is a concern for us is because it will cause changes that we as humans are going to struggle with. But life as a whole will sail through it. It will adapt. Species will go extinct, but others over time will come to take their place in the new habitats that are created. But we as humans have existed only across a very small time scale. And so for us, this change is really challenging. And certainly for our societies, this change is really challenging because many of our cities are built within a couple of meters of the high tide mark. So, it will have profound impacts on our economies and our societies. And it will have impacts in the natural world, but eventually life will go on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's, because a lot of the times when we hear about climate change, I think for me at least, a very initial worry is what's it going to do to the environment? But in a way, it feels like now what you're saying there is it's almost more of a selfish thing to worry about than a bigger kind of global event. That's really interesting. Someone says you have great optimism in the comments. Um, there's just one last question, and we might go a few minutes over time. But the question is, and this is very interesting, is there a practice like they have in some zoos to bring plants back into these natural habitats? So, and are there any problems with doing this? So is there an intention to take those plants and then put them back where they came from?
Absolutely. It's a well-established practice in conservation science to what we call translocation. So where, for example, there is a development proposed that, such as a mine or a new farm that's going to clear some forest, and where that may impact on threatened species, it is not unusual for scientists then to initiate a translocation program where they take the plants out of the habitat that's about to be converted and put them somewhere else in similar habitat where hopefully they'll be safe. There's a well-developed practice and a well-developed theory about that, but unfortunately, it rarely actually works over the longer term. Why it rarely actually works over the longer term is a long and involved discussion, but it basically boils down to we haven't done enough of it. We don't know enough about how to do it well. And every plant species is very, very different to every other plant species. Even if they're closely related, they will have very different habitat requirements that we will barely understand, if we understand them at all. They will have different associations with other organisms. So one area that Donna's worked a lot in is fungi, and particularly the mycorrhizal associations between the roots of plants and the fungi in the soil. And each species of plant will have its own soil fungi that it forms partnerships with. And we don't understand that. So when you take a plant out of a habitat here and you plant it in habitat here, which looks superficially similar, we don't know whether at the microscopic level, at the subsoil level, whether it's similar at all. So mostly those translocation attempts fail. And the reason they fail is I think we just don't know enough about the biology.
Yeah, wow. And it's also almost cultural what you're saying too. If they have sort of these interrelationships with other species and you break those relationships and you can't put them back together again, then,
Mm.
it's sort of, it kind of gives you this like weird idea that plants have this kind of culture that we don't understand, these relationships that we can't recreate.
Absolutely. No organism exists in isolation. Every organism is part of a community and a part of an ecosystem and depends entirely for its survival on a multitude of other species. And it's folly to imagine we can just take a plant from here and put it there and it will be fine. We obviously can't.
Mm.
And experience has shown that we need to understand uh, ecosystems in much, much greater depth than we currently do. We may never know enough to be always successful at these sorts of things. But that's what keeps me optimistic is we've always got something to do. There's always something more to investigate and something more to know.
Yeah, wow. There's another question here for you, Donna. Have you read or are you inspired by the book The Day of the Triffids? Have you heard of this title?
I have heard of this title. I think I've seen the movie. I don't know if I've read the book. I remember watching that as a kid. And look, I am a bit of a sci-fi fan. So yeah, super, super interesting. And I guess, of course, that idea, and I think most people would have heard of Day of the Triffids. And you know, again, having those works transplant, having this entry point that people kind of have, yeah, like I've heard of Day of the Triffids or I've read Day of the Triffids. Hang on a minute. Like, why is this little plant running around? That's hilarious. Or, whatever the entry point is, that's okay. Because I kind of feel like you have that really quick entry point, but I would watch viewers as they were kind of watching the work and they would stay there for a while and you would see like kids and families kind of gather around and start to have these conversations. And then they would read like the artist statement that was next to it. And then you'd kind of see them kind of look and go, hang on a minute, this is based on something really serious that is happening. And you can just see it's a really just different way to kind of get people talking about these plants. And also, as Darren was just saying, these really intricate ecosystems. Like, let's not forget that humans are absolutely part of these interconnected ecosystems, and we are not separate. We are within that, and when we are removed, or when something is removed around us, then there is implications.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you guys for all the great questions, by the way. Just to kind of sum up here, is there any final words or anything that we've kind of missed on that you think is really important to say here today, either Darren or Donna?
Uh, you go, Donna.
Um, I guess, just to me, it's about relationship. What we're doing right now is about relationship. We're talking to each other. We're communicating with each other. We're asking questions. We're listening to each other. We're being respectful of each other. And I think, just I don't know. Just think about relationships, not only human relationships, but all relationships. Yeah, as you go out in the world.
And I'd echo that, Donna, and all of those things. And I'd say stay curious, keep experimenting, push boundaries, talk to people you don't normally talk to, because I think Donna and I have both found we're now greatly enriched professionally and even personally by having worked together. Uh, and that's been a real success. And I hope it can be that for others too.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear two different methodological perspectives on the same project, and particularly from two researchers who are so aware of each other's approaches. And I think the work that you've both done together, and Donna, the many different art science collaborations that you've done over the years. They really exemplify the ways in which artists and scientists can collaborate on equal footing and the ways in which having these different perspectives on the same project can lead to novel outcomes as well. And I think, in last week's laser talk, the topic of stewardship was brought up, and this idea that audiences might appreciate or even want to become involved in citizen science through engaging in participatory art. And I think projects like yours um, really do this and have that potential by sort of exposing something to a new audience that they may not have known about before. So thank you both so much for being here today and for introducing your work to us. And I can see everyone in the chat is thanking you as well. It's just been great and lovely to get you both together here.
Well,
Well,
thank
thank you
you.
for having us, Alinta.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to everybody for turning up. It's a joy to us to that people care enough to listen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the class. We had Dicot 103 here today, who asked some great questions. We also had the Das Lab in Germany, who also asked some great questions. Um, Before we all leave today, I know we're running a little bit over time. I just wanted to make a brief announcement to say this is our fourth and our final Laser Bergen for this season. So the reason for that is myself and co-organizer Jason Nelson are probably having a baby in about 3 weeks' time. So lucky
Probably.
you can't see me below here. But we're going to be taking a little bit of time off. So thank you both so much for summing up this kind of little season for us. But we will be back with more Laser Bergen, hopefully later in this year or something like that. So yeah, thank you to our audience who's been consistently with us, and thank you to both Darren and Donna for rounding out the first Laser Bergen season. It's been a lovely way to sum up, and it would be great to come back and see you all again later on.
Thank you.
Thank you.